Hey guys, this is Dr. Mike. Today I'm going to be reviewing the book, The Practicing Mind, Developing Focus and Discipline in Your Life, which is written by Thomas Sterner. So let's talk about this book. What I love about this book is number one, it's not a very big book to read. I read it in 2 days. So if you're somebody that's pressed for time, it's a great book. But let me get into it a little bit. What is the practicing mind? Really, it's a mind that is focused on present moment awareness. You see, most of us spend much of our time in either the past or the future, but we really don't put much of our energy and focus into the present. We're too worried about what happened in the past, things that we can't change, or we're too worried about a future which hasn't come yet. And Thomas Sterner talks about this. And what he's really alluding to is what is called in psychology temporal orientation toward time. Now, Philip Zimbardo has a great book that talks about this orientation toward time. And really, it's our focus in how our focus on time impacts our outlook on life and our perception of life. You see, a lot of what we do and a lot of how we feel is driven by our perception of time and where we are in life. Thomas Sterner talks about in the book how when we're kids, we view time going so slow. But as we get older and we become adults, we view time going so fast. And so what we do is we have a habit of reflecting on the past or a habit on reflecting on a future that hasn't occurred yet or goals that we haven't achieved yet. And we forget about the present or being and living in the here and the now. So this book really talks about the concept of being mindful. And what I think is really powerful about the book is he talks about the difference between process and product orientation. Now, we're not talking about building a telephone per se, but we're talking about the process of going through the process of life. In fact, what he identifies life is as basically a long practice. It's basically a practice that we go through for the majority of our life. That's how he sees life. So it's a process of practice that goes on and on and on until we're gone. Now, I also like that in the book, he talks about how we need to embrace the process as opposed to focusing on the product. Now, the product means focusing on the outcome that we want to achieve and spending our time in that place. So that means focusing too much on the future, that we don't really embrace the process that we're going through to get to that goal. Because the true learning really begins when we begin to accept and embrace and find joy in the process that we're going through. I find that you're more motivated when you find a reason to love the process that you're in, even if it's a process that is difficult, even if it's a process that sometimes hurts. You have to find a reason to love the process that you're going through. Because ultimately, product will never get you to the goal of the product. It's really understanding the process that's involved in getting to the product that you're trying to achieve or the goal that you're trying to achieve. So he really heavily talks about embracing the process as opposed to living and just living our lives trying to achieve a product first. So I love the book. The other thing that he talks about is how one can go about developing this practicing mind. And what he says is that there are four things that you can do to really focus on process. One, simplify. And what he means by that is you take any process and you break that process down into small processes. Okay, so you take something big and make it smaller so it's not so overwhelming. Then you can focus on it right then and there. Then the second thing he talks about is small. He gives it the word small. And what he means by that is looking at your goal and making smaller goals out of that one major goal. You see, you need to have wins on a daily basis or weekly basis. And so you have to devise small goals in order to achieve that bigger goal. Then the third thing he talks about is short. And what he means by that is really giving yourself short amounts of time to achieve specific goals. So instead of trying to work on a project for 10 hours, work on it for 45 minutes a day. Because then what you're doing is you're able to focus for that moment in that time at an optimal level, as opposed to burning yourself out in the process of trying to achieve whatever the goal is. And the last thing he talks about is going slow. Now, that doesn't mean going slow to the point where you're not really getting anything done. But what he's saying is he wants you to focus on being slow or moving in a methodical way where you are really being mindful of what you're doing. And this is what will allow you to develop and maintain the practicing mind, because practice focuses on what he calls being simple, small, short, and slow. Now, that's kind of different to what we typically focus on, but I'll tell you that it's an effective method, because if you look at major companies like Toshiba or Honda, their business success comes from the fact that they focus on process improvement and being continuously driven towards continuing to perfect their processes. And through the perfection of the processes, they're able to create higher quality products. And we as individuals are no different. If we focus on process, developing better habits, developing better processes, developing better focus, and breaking things down into smaller goals and taking our time, we can achieve optimal levels of performance over time. Again, what he says is this. He says that we need to view life as a long practice session. So don't focus on the product or the goal or the end result. Get lost in the process and begin to become aware of the process that you're in, so that you can achieve that optimal level of performance that you so desire.